In the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. I'm Andres Vorgan, and today we'll be interviewing Ugo Bardi. Ugo, could you please introduce yourself and
Hello,
your credentials for those who are
my
unfamiliar?
credential. Okay, let me try. I am Ugo Bardi. I'm Italian. I live in Italy. I'm speaking to you from a basement in Florence, in Italy. It's a nice place, a little wet here, but warm. And in terms of credentials, I think maybe I'm known for some books I've been writing, maybe like this one. I can show it to you. This is the latest one. I didn't write it, but I edited it. Like I'm one of the two editors. It is The Limits and Beyond, which is a comment by several authors about this famous book, which I can show you too. This is the original 1972 book titled The Limits to Growth, which started the current, I would call it, catastrophist movement, of which I am proud to be a representative, although it seems that for some people, for some reason, I'm not catastrophistic enough. And so I'm
Right,
being
right.
criticized. I don't think that the end of the world will come so soon. But anyway, in catastrophism, there are so many variations. So I don't know, Andrea, what kind of catastrophist you are. You are one of those catastrophes thinking, well, hey, we're going to die tomorrow. Okay, get
No,
ready.
no, no. I'm very optimistic.
Okay,
I believe
good.
all is well and all will be well.
Let's see. I am sort of technological catastrophist. I'm retired from my position at the university this year. But for my professional work, I was a technologist, mostly technologist. Means they work with technology and you try to improve technologies. And you, as a technologist, you understand what technology can do and what it cannot do. And you had to, in my modest opinion, you had to try to avoid being anti-technology, which is typical of a fraction of the catastrophistic movement or whatever it is. People like things they hate, this kind and
Yes,
so you have to be careful with technology. Sometimes it works. That's
yes,
normally not. Normally not. I mean, if you build up your career, I don't know what was your career, Andre,
yeah,
but if you work in technology, you see that most technologies don't work. That's a basic rule. You can also expand it to say no technology works, but there is a corollary which says sometimes one technology works. And when one technology works, it changes things. So you have to
yeah.
take that into account.
Hmm. So, you mentioned you were a professor. Did you have a degree in something specific?
I was trained as a chemist, but really I never worked in hard chemistry. I used to work with crude oil for a certain period of my life, catalysis. That was a fun, but
Mhm.
not smelling so good. So I,
And some people have mentioned you're affiliated with the Club of Rome. Could you tell us about that?
by theory, I said,
Oh, the Club of Rome. Did you say it's your theory or
no, my club, I belong to the Club of Rome. As you
okay?
know, the Club of Rome was the sponsoring think tank which financed, produced, and encouraged this group of authors who produced this book. In 1972 is the rather well known. That was the one of catastrophism existed already, but if you this was the first time somebody tried to quantify catastrophism, which was a very interesting attempt, which was successful in terms of being able to some sort of prediction of the future. But you have to be very careful when you try to predict the future because the future is very difficult to predict. But you can sort of let's say, paint the colors of the future. If you have a feeling of what the future could be, and this was what this book was about. You see this kind of curves like this. You see this is the
Yes.
way things were modeled.
Hmm.
You have things go up, reach a maximum, and then go down. It is It is the first time in the several respect, but it was not exactly the first. The method was already developed maybe 50 years before. The first models of this kind were models used in epidemiology, the first catastrophistic models. You make a model in epidemiology. Is it the way you pronounce it? Epidemiology.
Yeah. That's. I think
Sort
people
of.
will understand.
You will understand, I hope, when you discuss how viruses will
Yes.
spread. Now, from the viewpoint of a virus, the theory is catastrophistic because all these models say that the sickness, the epidemic will grow and then collapse because
Yeah.
viruses are typical organisms which exploit finite resources, which is people.
Yes.
So if you
Yes.
are a virus, you better be catastrophistic.
Hmm. Hmm.
Even if you are not a virus, I found the basic model. You see, this is the rather well-known, famous model,
Hmm.
which is the so-called base case model. It said in 1972, it said, well, if we keep going like this, we grow up until more or less 2010, 2020, and then we start collapsing. We go down, we have pollution which keeps growing for a while, then it goes down too. And population here was very, quotes, optimistic, quotes, in the sense that they predicted that it would keep going for about 20, 30 years. It will reach about 14 billion people, sorry, which was not believable. And then later models corrected this exaggeration because models also adapt to reality. It's not the opposite, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. Of course.
The
Yeah.
map is not the territory, as we know.
Hmm.
This was the most famous thing, and it was good. It was a good model because it sort of framed the question. Don't take it as a prophecy. Don't take it as something that people see in a crystal ball. So what was seeing is a whole world. Everybody just repent for your sins. Andrea, are you a sinner, Andrea?
I'm a cultivator of virtue.
So you have nothing to repent about. I myself, I think I should repent about something, but really I cannot see myself doing so much damage as other people can do. So it's fine. It's a very interesting story, which
Hmm.
I started discovering. When
When?
when it was 2001, September 11. I was
Oh.
there, not in New York. I was in the United States. I was in Berkeley, California, but I saw these things as something is wrong here. And so I discovered this at that time. I knew already, but I had never considered that. But I discovered the catastrophistic part of myself.
Oh.
Maybe you
Okay.
had a similar epiphany.
Hmm.
Did you?
Yeah. Well, mine. It was in the kind of the pandemic, I
The
guess.
pandemics,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because before in 2015, oil was still going up, and then so all the peak oil stuff, I was like, oh no, that can't be real.
That
And
can
then in
be the
2019 or 2020, when they started doing the lockdowns and stuff, I'm like, oh, this must
This is
be
it.
related to
Yeah.
oil going down.
Ah,
Yeah.
so it's fun to be a catastrophist, except when people, as I said, people say you are not a good catastrophist, Ugo. You don't say that everybody's going to die soon. Okay, I'm sorry.
Uh,
Oh,
yeah. So I know there was some subsequent kind of modifications, but it was from what I read, the base case was the most accurate to what we have, except for the population, which got revised. Is that correct? Or
it is moderately correct, but I repeat, the aim of these models is not to predict the future.
oh,
It
okay.
is to paint the future, make something to draw something that could be the future.
Hmm.
and then you see what the future is for real.
Yeah.
But you have to wait. And actually, the future never comes. Always, it becomes the present. But you keep moving in a certain direction. And you saw that here, clearly there was something good in this book. Then was not exact. It could not be. It was not perfect. It could not be. And it can still be modified. It is not written in stone. It is written in on paper.
Mhm.
And think of something. What changes the future is one thing. It is technology, not people. People don't change the future. It's like an epidemic. Viruses do not change the trajectory of an epidemic. Viruses just do their thing. It is people who change technology. You use vaccination if it works, not always works, or you use medicines, or you whatever. Then you can change. Technology can change the trajectory of an epidemics. Not easy, as we saw. Not so easy. But
So
so okay, go on.
yeah, yeah. I was just usually when I tell people about the limits to growth study, based on my understanding of it, it looked like it started to plateau around 2015 and then go down slowly, and then around 2020 it started to go down quickly until bottoming out sometime in the 2030s, and then it started, well, I guess to rebound or flatline. I'm not sure exactly.
Nobody's sure about that.
Yeah.
Of course, that is correct. That's the shape of the curves.
Hmm.
It is the characteristic of collapses. Collapses. It takes some time to accumulate things that can collapse. When you have accumulated sufficient stuff, then you can collapse. If you don't have a
Hmm.
growing phase before collapse, then you don't. And then
Yeah.
the whole thing is this, as I was showing you before, the Seneca
Oh
curve. You
yes,
see,
very
first
good.
you go up, then down fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's normal. It's because the system becomes it is sort of a law of physics, although it doesn't come from the first principles of physics. I couldn't find. I don't think anyone can find a way to deduct the Seneca curve from the first principles of physics. At least I tried and I couldn't. But it is what happens. If you study complex systems are all those systems where many elements are networked and interact with each other, then you have things happening at some moment. Usually, the system start deciding, well, I want to destroy myself. And every
Right.
element of the system cooperates to destroy the whole thing.
Yeah, that's what I was seeing in the 29 or 2020 was all the signs and symptoms of catabolic capitalism in action.
Okay, exactly. Also,
Yeah.
you use this term catabolic collapse was developed by John Greer, I think, right?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
I think so. Yes.
I'll try to interview him a little later. He's
No,
just
no,
hard to
no. It's
get
okay. It's
because
a
he doesn't use the internet.
great man.
Yeah. Mhm.
Although he sees the collapse gradual, much more. He doesn't
Yes.
agree with me, but it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah.
Never trust a catastrophist, I think.
I was just reading your book Seneca Effect yesterday, and in it you mentioned that there are some signs to look out for just before the Seneca Cliff as it starts to go down. Could you tell us, like, let's say oil prices might seem to go down, but that's actually a sign of
It could be. It could be
yeah.
the top, the upper part of the curve is a moment of very high instability. And also for this, it's a historical observation. You see that there are moments in which people here they start thinking, what are we going to do here? We realize that something is wrong, and so they start doing things, changing this, make war to somebody on somebody. Then maybe we can invent something, and it is possible in some cases to invert the trend. If you're really willing to spend money on something, then you don't have to collapse. In a biological system, in a free market system, then you will see normally collapses follow this kind of curves. But if humans start deciding that they don't want it to happen, and then things can be done, but you don't forget that resources are always limited. So you can, if you have an economy, there are several sectors, metallurgy, say healthcare, and industry, oil extraction, and other things. Then normally, if there were no such a thing as a financial market, as a government, as a deep state, I am a catastrophist. I do believe that the deep state exists, but
Well, I believe the deep state is just the staff of the government.
yeah, more or less. Yeah, we are brothers in catastrophism. As Kipling would say about the animals of the forest, and we are brothers. I was saying, so if you want to avoid that one specific sector does not collapse, then you can focus resources into that system and avoid collapse. But that will make other sectors more fragile. So what's happening, as you probably noted already, is that our healthcare system is collapsing, but we are directing everything we have into the oil production sector. So the oil production sector in the United States is not collapsing. It is still growing because it was a decision of those people who have the capability to decide those sectors, not single people or sectors of the economy, say, we concentrate all our resources on oil extraction. Then you can avoid the collapse, which in the United States had already started in 1970. Then somebody will say, no, we don't want this. Why don't we want this? Because we don't care about the health of old and fat people. We care about the military power, which is normal. I mean, there is nothing strange about that. Governments are about military power, mostly. Part also to help citizens sometimes, but mostly not. Right. So say, we take money out of the healthcare sector, the pension sector, the leisure system, and then we concentrate it into the oil production system, which means that we promote this thing that we call fracking or shale oil or tight oil, and then that curve was going like that. Oh, it's already going.
Yes, exactly.
It is possible. You can do that. Mm-hmm. And it is not a good idea, in my opinion, but in this case, it was done. Mm-hmm. And that's where we stand now.
Yeah. So I'm remembering Alice Friedman published some numbers, and she was saying that for healthcare to be viable, the EROI, the general EROI needs to be at least 12. So the healthcare collapsing to me indicates that we must have be going below 12 right now in the EROI. And you were mentioning about the oil. So I just remember this really interesting segment in your Seneca Cliff book where you were saying how high prices lead to demand destruction, which lead to low prices. And then people think, oh, oil is getting cheaper, but actually their investments, they can't pay their workers as much. Or could you expand on that part?
Yeah, that's a point which is very well known in the science of economics. So it's nothing special. You have what is called demand destruction, and that goes usually in cycles. First, you have high prices. People stop buying something because they cannot afford it. Then the price goes down because demand goes down, and then you go up, and then you go down. We studied that in the case of the whale oil market in the 19th century. It's a fascinating subject. But you can do more than that. And as I said, when you decide to intervene in a system, you can change the way the system works. Humans are a little different from viruses. Viruses can only do their job. They go through your nose, infect you, and make you sick for a while. Then either you die or the viruses die, or both. Usually both. If you die, also the virus have to die.
Oh, right.
Viruses are not so smart, or maybe they are smarter. I don't know. Anyway, what is happening now is exactly this. In order for the oil industry to be working, to be viable, then oil prices must not go down too much. If the oil prices go below more or less $60 per barrel, just a very approximate estimate, then the fracking industry is doomed. So they have to stay over 70, $80 per barrel, but not much more than that, because otherwise people cannot afford oil. So you have to intervene in such a way to keep the oil within this range. For the time being, if you, not you, not me, but the powers that be, they can
Hmm.
keep the oil within this range, then the system keeps working for a while, not forever, but for a while it will. So what are we seeing now? We're seeing a demand destruction, which is lowering the demand for oil. So was going below $60 per barrel. So what you want to do at this point, you want to reduce the supply in order to push the prices up. And that was usually done by OPEC, the organization for the oil producing countries. They where always people say oil, the OPEC fixes the price. No, they don't. Not at all. They cannot. What they do is to put quotas on production. So if we don't produce too much, they are not usually very effective, but that's the idea. So when the oil prices are too low, producers form a cartel and reduce production, which is perfectly normal. It's the way markets work, and that has been typical up to a few years ago. Now it's the opposite, as you know, the price is too low also, but what's happening is that we see a cartel of buyers, consumers say, no, we won't buy your oil if it is over 60.
Oh, right. In Europe.
But
Yeah.
that's a trick, a smart trick, because it means that the Russians are not happy about that. Of course, they say, well, okay, you don't want our oil, we won't sell it to you. And with this can cause oil to go up. That's very smart. Very
Yeah.
smart.
And then the US can afford their shale. So
Yeah,
I was reading also that basically if the EROI falls below 9, then they basically won't be able to make it worthwhile for the people employed in oil, and then they might just like walk off the job, like the nurses are walking off the job now.
yeah, that's a good point. That was the work by Charlie Hall and Tom Murphy. Very good work. Although I'm not sure that numbers are make sense. Depends how you consider the system. Maybe 9 is good enough. Maybe it's too little. I think there is a large uncertainty on this number. So there's clearly, if you go below 1, then
Then
it's
definitely.
over, game over.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's not clear what is the limit. I think we could afford to keep society going also to much lower
Mhm.
levels of the EROI, because really there is no physical set point say no, yes. But anyway, it's
Yeah.
clear that the problem we have now is that the EROI of the system has been going down. But not just that, because the work by Hall and Murphy neglected a lot of other factors which are at play, that, like, say, pollution, the costs of abating pollution, the cost of healthcare. Were
Hmm.
growing madly, probably in part also because of the results of pollution. And don't forget that a form of pollution is bureaucracy. You see,
Oh, right.
bureaucracy, it's growing all the time. So it's a cost on society that you
Mhm.
don't know how to fight unless the whole thing collapses, which is a good way to get rid of bureaucracy. And then you restart.
Well, yeah. So let's talk about a little bit, like, so we talked about kind of the beginning of the decline, and what do you see happening in that kind of more steep decline? Like, what could we expect to see if you've
I,
thought about it?
I tell you frankly, nobody knows.
Nobody
It's
knows. Okay.
No, seriously, I've been discussing with some of the
Yeah.
top catastrophists in
Hmm.
on this planet. Like I remember having discussed this with Dennis Meadows. Dennis Meadows, the author, the leading author of this book. He said, I have no idea what's going to happen after the peak. And the same was said by the people involved with peak oil, Colin Campbell. Maybe you know the name, Colin Campbell, the inventor of the concept of peak oil, and
Oh
he
yeah.
died last month. Um, but he said, well, after when we arrive at the peak, all bets are off. We don't know what
Oh,
the
okay.
hell is going to happen.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I am very surprised that was said maybe we'll have wars. I was completely surprised by what's going on, what's happening. It taken me completely by surprise. This war was so mad, so silly, such a waste of resources. It's unbelievable how somebody could decide we have such enormous problems and we worsen them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
How
true.
can you?
They get historically wars have always made things worse. So
Yeah, Andrea,
uh,
are you Russian?
yeah, yeah. I'm what do you call it? As far as I know, I'm a Rurik kid. So I'm
What is that?
a descendant of Rurik.
Well, yeah, the center of Rurik, yes, but you living where?
Oh, I'm living in Canada, Owen
In
Sound.
Canada. But how old is your Russian ancestry?
You, well, a
Your
thousand years, I
father
guess.
was a real. No, you speak English like an American.
Oh,
So
oh yeah. Well, I've lived here for since 1993.
okay, okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. And I tell you, you look Russian.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess people tell you that.
Yeah. 99.7% Eastern European.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. You're a descendant of Rurik. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. So I'm sure you. We're not. I don't think we're going to discuss what's happening in Ukraine,
Yeah.
but okay,
Well,
it's.
yeah, my focus is kind of like helping the local area here with the
Mhm.
transition, and so I want to kind of inform the mayors on the county council how what's going to play out and what we can do for it. So we've gone through the peak and the cliff, and I don't know if you have any information on the what's called the Seneca bottleneck, because I know I've read it in some of your books.
Well, we're treading in an uncertain ground. As I said, the whole story is very surprising. Nobody expected the pandemic, for instance, completely unexpected. Nobody imagined that. We could have imagined, look, we have, maybe you can explain it, we have a big problems. The healthcare costs are growing too fast. And how do we stop taking care of people with one excuse or another? So could be, but I don't know if, or maybe it was really some of those things which self-assemble in the meme sphere. You know what is the meme sphere?
Hmm. Yeah.
The area, the
It,
great bowl of memes which surrounds us. So people decide at some point everybody starts to be scared of something. Someone starts crying fire, and then everybody runs
all
in
right.
one direction. It was a pandemic, but
Yeah.
if somebody screams fire, it means something has happened.
So
And and then the same. This seems to be over. And then they started the war. The war also is. I don't know. I don't know why people decided to do this idiotic thing. Wars are always idiotic, right? But if you start a war, it means that you think it will solve some problem. Anyway, it is the overall effect is to destroy Europe, and that,
right, right. Well, my personal theory was that Putin or the Russian powers they didn't see enough benefit from supplying Europe with oil and gas, and they're like, okay, we can do whatever we want in Europe now because
not so simple, but who knows? Maybe we know that Putin is evil, so we can
who
attribute to
knows?
him all sorts of evil intentions. It's but
I
the
know
real yes.
I've read a lot of history books, and so what I usually understand by the Seneca Cliffs, like what happened, like during a famine or whatnot, is well, usually there's like a lot of general chaos as people are like looking for food, and some people are not finding it, and some people are killing other people for it, and things like this. And then so that's why it kind of goes down until we get to the bottom, which is the bottleneck,
At
which
some point,
a
there is a
population
bottom. There is a
bottleneck.
bottom. There is a population, economic, wealth bottom, and then but you can restart. I'm
Yeah. Mhm.
reasonably convinced that you can
Yeah.
restart.
And
At
so,
least in
so
Europe. Yes, so okay, keep
what
going.
do you think are some good things to help with the restart, like that we could do now? Like my
Well, I
idea was
see.
to make villages, where people have
Eh,
enough land to grow their own food and firewood and have permaculture food forests. I don't know if you had something along
That
those
would be
lines.
very nice, although I think we have to reduce a little the population for returning to a village life as it was during the Middle Ages, which is a bit uncomfortable from this viewpoint. As you probably read in my book, there are some calculations that say that by the 6th century AD in Western Europe, the former Roman Empire, there were about 18 million people. And you know that right now in Europe we are a little more than that.
Yeah, yeah,
But at least just the European Union, I think, is 350 million people. So we can go
yeah,
back to Middle Ages. We contract the population. If we do it fast enough, it will be a little harsh for Europeans. I would not suggest that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was looking, and the definitely Europe is way above carrying capacity.
Yes,
Uh,
by all means, but
with some kind of heroic effort, and
heroic
people
effort.
with a heroic effort, you may be able to sustain the population if people only don't use wood for heating, they only use it for cooking, and they only have 1 or 2 meals a day, then maybe. But most likely it'll probably be that Seneca Cliff, and then people will come out
And
of that bottom.
we don't, nobody has such power or deciding what's going to happen. There is
Oh,
no
it's not a
such a power.
decision, it's kind
There's
of
not a
just
decision. Things will
yeah,
happen.
yeah, exactly.
Now, if things keep going the way it is, where they are, I think we are going toward a collapse, which would be very fast, very harsh, very deep, which means, very unfortunately, it means killing maybe 100 million people, maybe 200, just in Europe.
Yep.
And I say this because it already happened. It is not the first time. Uh, Try to go back to 14th century, 14th century in Europe, about 80 million people in Europe with the technology that you mentioned, technology which meant villages and local production, but 80 million people in 14th century. 80 million people at that point, though they were too many for Europe. And you have the famine of, I think was 1340 or something. I don't remember and then after famine, people are weakened by a poor diet. They didn't have fast food at the time, McDonald's and things, but their diet could be pretty bad.
Mhm.
And then the population is weakened, and then you have the Black Death coming, which means about 30% of the European population disappears in 30, 40 years. Which is a
Mhm.
nice Seneca Cliff like this one, you see.
Yes,
This
yes.
is 1350, 1330, and then you go down like this, which means at that time you lost about 30 million people in a few decades. And
Mhm.
it's like that. Then you go
Yeah.
down, then you bring you up again. Why? Because at that point you had time to rebuild,
Mhm.
and there was not complete collapse, and we still had the technology of before. Europe was coming from the Crusades.
Mhm.
First attempt, Europeans are like this, the first attempt to conquer the world, the Crusades, 1095. I think they started with people said, God wants it. And so
Right.
you take a shield
Yeah,
with
yeah,
a
yeah,
cross
yeah.
and let's go kill the infidels.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. I
well, a
remember.
bright idea. How can you think this is a bad idea? What do? We band together and we go kill those evil Muslims. Okay, they
Right.
did it for 2 centuries, didn't work so well, and so they had to come back, and there was collapse,
So based
first
on
collapse. Yeah,
yeah,
okay, keep going. Then there was
based
another
on
one,
my
but keep going.
analysis, and was that the John Michael Greer says that what usually happens is that there's the elite, or what they call the senile elite. I guess Biden is a good example of that. And then there's a succession crisis. So there's a counter elite. So the bureaucrats you were talking about, and there become too many kind of counter elites, and then they replace the elites, and in an illegitimate way, like a coup, and then that reduces confidence in the entire process, and so they don't. Then there's a rapid succession crisis until everybody reaches carrying capacity of the land, and
Very well
so.
said. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the best place to be during one of these steep descents is in a place that's already at carrying capacity or below carrying capacity, in my understanding. And
Could be. You described it nicely as John Greer does. You have somehow, I said, people find an agreement that we all work together to destroy the system, which is also called negative feedback, because the same forces that once were pushing the system up, now they don't have anymore the kind of resources to exploit which they had before, so they become negative forces. They pull the system down. So where is the best place to find yourself? Good question. Good question. It depends. We don't really know, because every collapse, in my opinion, is different. So it would be difficult to say that it is very dangerous, in my opinion, at this point. It is very dangerous to be in a place like the one you mentioned, a place which is sort of independent and with sufficient resources. Because if you have sufficient resources, then you are a magnet for people who don't have sufficient resources, and they will want to destroy you, to take your resources. That's well known. Actually,
oh, right.
it's happening
It,
right now. Actually,
um,
okay.
okay.
So I am
Yeah,
there.
we can resume. I think I just have to double
Has
check
been turned
that the
off.
live
Do
stream
you?
is still working. There. Okay. Yeah, we're back.
Okay, I'm sorry. No, I don't know whose fault was
Yeah,
this, but
I don't know. I think it was there was probably a problem with the Jitsi
a
system.
glitch.
The
Nah,
glitch
the
with the
system is